واسع حبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك كن سموحا لخصمك ألقى خصمك أحبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك واحتفل بالمودة إنما
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat show. A beautiful Friday evening here in the Johannesburg region. We are coming to you live this Friday evening from our studios in Sunninghill. Yeah, the last evening before spring day. Let's hope that the weather progressively gets hotter. But usually, I think in the last good few years, September gives you one more cold front, almost like a farewell from winter side. And then you can start packing away the jackets and taking off the blankets and start getting yourself ready for summer, lighter clothing. It's amazing how the seasons work, and each season has its own atmosphere and its own feel, and you take out sections of your wardrobe and you're bringing other sections. But spare a thought for those who don't have that luxury. Come winter or summer, they pretty much have to do with the same clothing, with the same facilities, with the same utilities. Right, so we're focusing politics in South Africa this evening on the program, and our guest in studio is a well-known political analyst and a person who's been on the airwaves of ITV, has been in the studio on multiple occasions, and then there is none other than political analyst Ralph Matekga. There's just so much to analyze in South Africa, always. Last year was a big year in terms of the ANC's conference, and earlier this year it was all about whether Zuma will survive or Zuma will go. Zuma's gone, and now there's just always so much to talk about in South Africa. If you want to be a journalist, then I would say come to South Africa. There's never a dull day. You want to be in media, you want to be in political analysis, maybe even if you want to be a politician, come to South Africa. You'll never get bored in the job. Ralph, good evening and welcome once again.
Good evening and thanks for inviting me.
Do you feel like that as a political analyst in South Africa, that there's always something to chew on, there's always something to comment on? It makes life for an analyst interesting, even though it's not as stable as the country perhaps would like it to be.
Yeah, well, I think it's fun for us. I mean, of course, this is part of democratic development in South Africa, part of consolidation. There is instability within the institutions. People are trying to figure out what is happening. People in the business sector, civil society organizations, even politicians themselves, they find themselves in a situation that they cannot explain at times, even if they are supposed actors in the broader scheme. So here in South Africa, it is very interesting. I can say to you that actually in a week, about 7 days, 6 of those days, I can talk to various media outlets in South Africa, people asking different questions, constantly interesting. Just when you think it can't get more interesting, it keeps on getting interesting in South Africa. Of course, consequences are serious because it affects people's lives.
Now, you wrote a book last year, and I remember you spoke to us when you were writing the book, and even before it was published, When Zuma Goes, and the title rang so true earlier this year. Do you feel, how do you feel after writing a book like that, and then Zuma eventually goes? Do you see a lot of what you predicted in there come true?
Well, I think so. I mean, you know, when you write a book about a nation, and the nation that is trying to explain its own problems. I mean, the nation that find myself in this moral abyss, if you like, where there is rampant corruption, there is, you can say, collapse of social cohesion, the economy is not doing very well. The nation was trying to find in the last 7 or 8 years of President Jacob Zuma's leadership, what is the cause of that? What will make all this go away? And what the nation did was to think that, oh, when one Jacob Zuma is gone, all the problems are going to go away. That's when I said to myself that, you know what, I need to try to explain how this nation relates to leadership. Zuma is gone, and I've been saying that corruption in South Africa is quite systemic. It's going to take a while for political leaders to value anti-corruption as a worthy political project against which you can actually launch a campaign. So it's getting to that point. Zuma is gone, problems are there. We are having a commission of inquiry into state capture. We're beginning to realize, as allegations are coming out at the commission, that even the top investigators, the Hawks, are alleged to have at times tried to squash a case against the Gupta family. That says that our problems was not just about Zuma. There is a problem in us. President Jacob Zuma was just a symptom of that problem. We need to look into ourselves as to how we actually relate to leadership. That's why I decided to frame it on Zuma. But actually, I put the blame back to the nation to say, you get the leaders that we deserve.
Is that the reason that Ramaphosa dissipated so quickly? I mean, it's obvious it was never going to last indefinitely. Even Mandela's wave of optimism that swept across the country came to an end at some point or the other. But Ramaphosa's one seems to have come to an end much quicker than many people had expected. Is it because people had this notion that it had a lot to do with Zuma and not the deep-rooted issues? And when these issues started to pop out once again, that's when frustrations were now leveled against Cyril Ramaphosa.
I mean, the irony is that when Zuma's hold on power was waning, people were thinking that once he's gone, all problems are gonna go away. We personified Zuma as all our problems. But what we then did as well was also to do the same thing about Ramaphosa. We started building the idea of Ramaphosa as someone who is a savior, someone who comes out there, who's gonna come, take over from Zuma and be able to do better. Forgetting one thing, he exists within the system, that is Ramaphosa. He is from within the ANC. And that is why that Ramaphosa, the spark just took off very quickly. The flame was just raging very quickly, but it went down very quickly as well when people started realizing that, look, this man can't even get rid of everyone who is alleged to have been corrupt when he undertook his cabinet reshuffle. Each and every day, South Africans begin to realize that they need to settle down. This euphoric approach is not helping them. The problem is you create a problem in a leader, personifying it in a leader, then you create another leader such as Ramaphosa, thinking he's going to solve your problems. It doesn't work.
Right, very interesting points. Time for our first break. When we come back, we continue this live program with political analyst Ralph Matega. Welcome back. So we're taking a look at politics in South Africa. We're taking a look at President Cyril Ramaphosa. Can he save South Africa? And we'll also later in the program be talking about some of the recent developments during this week in coalition politics in South Africa. Now, Ralph, before the break, we spoke about how quickly the Ramaphosa kind of just evaporated. Now, let's take it, one aspect at a time. When Ramaphosa won in Nasrec, it was a narrow margin, right? Very narrow. Yes. Even after he removed Zuma, there was still a strong factional presence of the Zuma camp, even if they were not necessarily loyal to him, but they were aligned to his interests. Now that a number of months have passed, how do you analyze the way Ramaphosa has been dealing with the so-called Zuma faction?
I think he has been negotiating his way through. If you look at what has happened in Northwest, it took quite a great deal of time to negotiate to get rid of Subra Mahumapelo, who was then the provincial chair of the party, to vacate the premier position. It took a while. It took negotiation. It took also, I believe, in terms of observation, protest by the people there, some way of a faction that might have partially instigated that protest thereof. But Ramaphosa did not take an authoritative stance and take a position against Subra because it's not doable. What that points to is also what we are seeing happening in KZN, where you still have people who are not so sure about realigning themselves towards Mr. Ramaphosa away from Jacob Zuma's politics. So it's an ongoing process, and I think that what is happening, it's a way for Ramaphosa to try to negotiate realignment of some of the provinces towards him. We don't know what is it that he has to give in return. Remember, it's not just about those people being loyal to Zuma, as you correctly point out. This is about a network of patronage. This is just how the ANC functions as a political party. You hold to a region, which is a province, and therefore you determine the distribution of resources within government in that province. In that way, you can build a strong power base through which you can actually have influence on the party's leadership at national level. If you don't have a provincial base, you really cannot. So people will hold on to those power base in provinces so that they can be able to be in a good position to bargain with the national leadership of the party. It's an ongoing process. It's not going to come to an end now. Every time we read the newspapers, we hear that there are those from KZN who are planning a special NGC to get rid of Mr. Ramaphosa and so forth. The only way they can stop is not because they just wake up and decide it is a morally defensible thing to support him. It will be because what's in it for us? What is it in return? politically that he can secure for them so that they can align themselves from that politics that was anchored on Jacob Zuma.
What's Zuma been doing in the interim? Has he been just focusing on his legal woes, or has he managed to somehow rally some support, at least within his province, keep himself a little insulated against any pressure from the party? Is he in any position to be doing any bargaining with Ramaphosa and those who now lead the party?
I mean, naturally, someone like Zuma, who is no longer in power, who has been able to build a network of alliances across provinces, across government, through his power hold as the president of the country. He no longer has that position of the president of the country, although he still has a leverage within KZN. The truth is that going to Jacob Zuma today and supporting Jacob Zuma today, it's not gonna guarantee you any access to resources within the ANC. That's just what it is. And politics works in a way that maybe you better gravitate towards those who are in power. So even if Zuma is still fighting, even if there are those who are using his personal problem to anchor their own political project, to drive their own interest, the reality is that at the end of the day, Zuma is fizzling out. At some point, he's going to get so isolated that he will just be focused on his own political woes. And I think that his main concern, it is his political woes. He knows he can no longer be suitable for any office for that matter. So it is this symbiotic relationship that exists where people are using his ability to understand street politics and they are anchoring their political movement. They are trying to bargain and negotiate with Mr. Ramaphosa. Zuma is falling away gradually.
I'll come back to Zuma in a moment when we talk about the state of capture inquiry and the Guptas, but just to round off on Ramaphosa, right? The Mabuza factor.
Yeah.
We know that without Mabuza swaying or backstabbing the NDZ faction, Ramaphosa would not have won at Nasrec. Ramaphosa owes him. Many felt that when he came in, at that very time, he should have used the opportunity, brought in NDZ as a deputy and said, well, I'm trying to, bridge the gap between the two factions. For some reason, he had to go with Mabuza. The New York Times runs the article. How much of a problem is Mabuza currently for Ramaphosa?
Look, I was watching Parliament, I think it was yesterday. Deputy President Didi Mabuza was appearing, answering questions there in Parliament. He was cantankerous. He was quite bad. Actually, for a while, I said to myself, oh my God, the opposition are going to have so much fun. Zuma is back in a different form. I mean, Mabuza is compromised. This article of New York Times is compromising him. No matter how much he can say to people that they need to go lay the charges, the reality is that the idea that he's not presidential, the idea that Mabuza is not a statesman is beginning to come out. And for me, that idea had almost dissipated until the New York Times came with that expose. It took that article for the New York Times. Of course, some of the things were known. Journalists such as Mzilikazi Africa had written about Mabuza for a while in the past. But the New York Times just framed that idea to say that, Mr. Ramaphosa, whatever you can say, here is your problem. You cannot rehabilitate Mr. Mabuza. So he's going to be under pressure. He's going to be disrupted. There was a dry run for that. We saw it in Parliament yesterday. Belinda Bozzoli, the EFF, some members of the EFF working out. So easy. They could poke holes in Mabuza's story. He looked out of place. And I think it's going to be very difficult for him going forward.
Now, you've written another book, Ramaphosa's Turn. Can he save South Africa? Many would say that if you're an ANC loyalist, you'll say, well, he needs to save the ANC first. They need to win the elections. Then he can save South Africa. But that's a very interesting debate in itself. You would get those who say, well, if Ramaphosa really cared about the country, he'd put the country first, even if it means that his party didn't win the next election and he no longer became president, but he will do what is right to be done now in the interests of the country. But I suppose that's a bit idealistic when you're talking about politicians.
Exactly. I deliberately wanted to address the question, can he save South Africa? And the way in which you are thinking about it, that can he save the ANC first? That's true. That's exactly. He cannot save South Africa if he cannot save the ANC, because if he fails to retain control of the ANC, and if he fails to show the ANC that you need me as your leader, you are a patient who is in ICU. You have been doing very badly. The moral integrity of you as the ANC, it's all gone. You need me now to allow you and to teach you to walk again. If the ANC allow him to save this party, I think that is the only way in which South Africans will be able to allow him to save. He cannot save South Africans without firstly saving the ANC. No matter how popular he is with South Africans will go vote for him, but the power constraint within the ANC will be such that he will not deliver on those things that South Africans might vote him for. So he needs to gain control of the ANC so that he can use the ANC to deliver some of the needs, the goals that the people of South Africa would like to build relationship with the ANC with. I believe when I look at his presidency, this is for the first time in the last few years that we are seeing a candidate who can actually carry the party. The integrity and the name of the ANC is not doing so well now after President Jacob Zuma. The structures have collapsed, not doing so well. The ANC Women's League is in trouble. The Youth League is in trouble as well. So the state of the party is such that it needs a leader such as Ramaphosa. And Ramaphosa has got credibility outside the ANC. The problem is one. Are the ANC actually willing to allow him to exert his own vision within the party, the vision that is shared by South Africans? That is a difficult one.
Now, apart from the leadership struggles and the factional battles of the ANC, how has he been doing since taking office in terms of policies, in terms of governance?
You know, he took the ANC at a crisis point. And whenever I think of this question, for me, it's what innovation would he bring about? I mean, I'm thinking here, Mr. Ramaphosa, a man who understands the bureaucracy, has worked at the National Planning Commission there. He's given us the National Development Plan, a very complex plan. And when I look at him, I'm thinking that, maybe he can give us the best in terms of policy. But then I realized that maybe we don't need that. We don't need you don't need to invent anything now. Just close the taps and stop the leak. Make sure that Eskom does no longer lose money. Stop corruption at Eskom. Go to Transnet and all those big spending state-owned entities and just close the taps. We're not saying give us people who are going to give us a governance turnaround or maybe financial turnaround to make Eskom self-sustainable in the next 2 years. All that I think people want is just to make sure that the looting stops. So that is what I think he's trying to do. At this point, you can't be innovative. You can't get foreign direct investment coming to put money in Eskom. You've got to stop the leaks there. Once you have dealt with the leakages, then you can be innovative. But also, what is it that he can achieve? Because remember, he did not even go to the elections. He does not have a popular mandate yet. So there is also a restraint. Maybe if he takes his party to the elections next year, comes back with a stronger mandate, maybe that will give him a leg to stand on and therefore bring about some of the structural reforms in our economy.
Is there anything in particular about him so far in office that has disappointed you?
Lack of being resolute within the ANC. Although politically I understand why. He can't come out right. He can't be more resolute. But lack of being resolute, and I also think that I can't see him controlling municipalities. I can't see him driving his vision to the municipalities. I mean, the Auditor General's reports on the municipalities showing dismal performance there. You look at municipalities around Gauteng and so forth. Our municipalities are collapsing and we don't want to acknowledge that. And when I look at him, does he prioritize that? I write a lot about local government, that you can't have a national government that is functional against the backdrop of a dysfunctional local government. So I wonder how those councillors who are members of the party, who are so far from the national level, the manner in which they have evolved to doing their own thing within the party, can they really listen to the president of the ANC saying to them, just stop what you're doing? And I don't think he's also trying enough at that level. That's just the way in which I see it. And I also think the worst decision he has made was to hike VAT. Why start by punishing everybody else while the moral problem has been caused largely by corruption within the corporates and also even within government? So when you increase VAT, you are spreading that cost. You are punishing everyone else and you are not even increasing corporate tax at that same time. That for me just was quite of a deep concern.
Okay, it's time for a break again. When we come back, we continue the discussion, political analysis on recent happenings here in South Africa with political analyst Ralph Matega. Welcome back. So in the last few weeks, we had quite a bit of focus on the Hajj broadcast here on the program. And now we come back to take a look at some of the political happenings in the country. Up to now, we've been talking about the last few months and just doing a bit of an overview in that regard. Now we focus more on recent happenings. And our guest in studio this evening is political analyst Ravat. He wrote the book last year, When Zuma Goes. And he's written a new book, which you'll find on the shelves, Ramaphosa's Turn, Can He Save South Africa? Now, of late, we've seen the state of capture inquiry, as it's been called now, right? Mm-hmm. Are the Guptas worried? One gets the sense that there was a big setback for the Hawks in the Free State on the Estina issue. Mm-hmm. There also seems to be a lot of fingering locally in terms of the foot soldiers, but one gets the impression that where they are now, they're pretty sitting pretty a bit. They've taken their loot, they've left South Africa. And it may be a bit of a long shot to hope that the Guptas will actually be brought to justice.
You know, it's quite sad when you start seeing cases crumbling. I mean, speaking about the Estina case, and also some of the people who have already appeared on this commission, of course, they've put the version of the story. But also, I believe when you start cross-examining people under oath, and when you start revealing some of the other things, as you are cross-questioning them, where their credibility come into question, a different picture comes out. And you know what? At the center of this is that there is no common unity in South Africa against the Guptas and what they did. There is nothing like that. We are so divided among ourselves as a nation that the Guptas actually are going to watch us tearing each other apart, because there are collaborators of the Guptas who are going to come into this commission, who are actually going to try to say there has been capture before, who are going to try to present evidence that will seek to discredit those who stood against the Guptas. And it might not be good evidence. So at the end of the day, as long as you don't have a common national, you can say, moral narrative against corruption, as long as you don't have that, you will not succeed. And that is what I see coming out of this commission. By the time the commission finishes after 2 years, there might be one or two recommendations relating to investigation. But I believe that the bigger part of the problem might end up being written off as a big misunderstanding between corporates, companies that have been dominating, the Guptas trying to be a new entry and trying to bring in and lest on government's program of BEE to actually undermine the very same program of BEE. It's a trial there. It is just the moral fabric of our economy. We have this thing in South Africa. We lack. We don't. You know, when people talk about the state capture and so forth, whose state? Because majority of the people in this country, I always point that out, have had the state just policing them. And 24 years into democracy, now they have been told that state has been captured by a particular interest group. And those who have been collaborators are saying that, no, we were trying to put the state in good hands, actually. The whites have had it. So we now know, as these things are coming out, you also know companies that have also been collaborators from the private sector, which then says that some of the companies that have spoken might have not spoken because they hate corruption, but just because they were kicked out of some of government deals. So there's a moral dilemma in the middle of this. Maybe it will get us, after the commission's work is done, we will get to where we have a sober, very clear, honest debate about the relationship between corporate, the private sector, political elites, and the broader society.
Yeah, you know, someone was saying the other day, the easiest thing for a president to do if he wants to kick something into touch is to put a commission of inquiry. There was a lot of anger after Marikana. You have the Fallen Commission of Inquiry. It sits for like 2 years. A lot of money is spent. And then those recommendations sit on ice for a while, and then they come to the fore, and it kind of just fizzles out and goes nowhere.
Exactly. You know, it's the oldest trick in the book, as you correctly state there. You want to get rid of the truth in government. You want to bury something, put it through a commission. Because once the commission's work is done, it still remains the discretion of the head of the executive as to how to formulate a response from the commission's recommendation. Someone might formulate a response in a way that does not actually make any difference. So Why is it, that we are not having the parallel investigation? There are certain issues that just have to be investigated directly. Much focus need to be on that, so that this commission is not being used to manage South Africans, but actually to bring about something while we are seeing investigations underway.
Another big talking point in the country at the moment, Ralph, is that of land. And I suppose the volume here around this particular debate is going to increase as we get closer to the elections. For a while, it seemed like it was the battle cry of the EFF. Ramaphosa seems to have pulled it away, taken it away from them, snatched it from their hands somewhat, taken control for the time being anyway of the land narrative. But it seems to be so confusing. There's so much of ambiguity. He's written this big article which was published in, one of the London newspapers, etc. And then you had Donald Trump tweeting and getting involved in the whole matter. But the ordinary South African still stands confused. Is it because there's so much rhetoric from the politicians? Is it that the media are not unpacking it? People are saying, is my house going to be taken? If I've worked for 30 years of my life, bought a small property, I'm running my business, is that going to be taken? How do you analyze how this whole land debate is playing out?
Land is a very sensitive issue. If it was possible, ideally, one would say to political parties, take a non-partisan stance when it comes to land. Do not use land to try to woo voters. But unfortunately, being political parties as we know, they are unable to avoid the lure of using the land. The ANC, from the get-go, they've mishandled the question of land. First of all, they go to parliament and take a motion that says we are going to amend the constitution to expropriate land. They are not consulting. And after taking that decision, then they go and consult. And the consultation processes are bringing different ways. Some people are saying, fine, pass the motion. Some are saying, change the constitution. Some are saying, you don't necessarily have to change the constitution. You can find a way. Some are saying, work on a fair compensation instead of no compensation. The consultative process is bringing in very interesting ideas. But the problem is that the ANC has already committed to a position of changing the constitution and therefore expropriating without compensation. Hence, the entire consultation process will be seen by others as just a tick box. That is the reason why, while in the middle of this parliamentary joint committee on constitutional review, while that committee was busy consulting with the people, Mr. Ramaphosa takes a position. Late night TV says that the ANC is going to press ahead with amendment of the constitution. Wrong thing to say while consultations were in place. They should have waited to see what the consultative processes bring. So at this point, it's so difficult because they've taken a position in parliament, which I think is also behind this increasing illegal land occupation. Because morally, our government has said morally that we are going to be able to take land without any compensation. So even when people are illegally occupying the land today, they are morally stronger than it would have been the case had they done it before government undertook that. They lost control of this thing.
Time for our final break. When we come back, we talk about events of this week in the country. Welcome back. Now we focus on developments in the last week or so here in South Africa. It's been pretty strange, a little chaotic, if you like. Nelson Mandela Bay, Ethel Trollip, it looked like he got a shock when he realized that he was ousted as mayor. And then everyone thought that Solim Simanga will go. The ANC and EFF together had the numbers. And then he had a trick up his sleeve. What's happening in this coalition politics?
The basis upon which these coalitions were agreed upon, and you and I are calling them coalitions. Some members of EFF get very angry when they hear us even calling this thing coalition, because the EFF insists they are not in a coalition with the DA. But of course, they voted to support the DA to retain control of those cities, the city of Tshwane much clearly, and the city of Johannesburg. And of course, also they've played a role in Nelson Mandela Bay. But the problem is that there was never an agreement between the DA and the EFF as to what is it that they wanted to achieve. They agreed on what they wanted to get rid of, which was the ANC-led government in those cities, which is what they did very well, successfully. It was an easy task. But when it comes to what exactly bring them together in terms of the vision, the model of service delivery that they need to pursue, the goals that they need to prioritize within those coalitions, there was never any agreement between the two parties. Actually, I'm not aware of the EFF signing up to anything when it comes to actually, or maybe even publicizing, what is it that they want to help the DA achieve? So there is no way you can sustain a coalition on the basis of your common dislike or your common enemy. It has to be about something that will always bring you together when you run into difficulties during the process of this coalition. So what we have seen in Nelson Mandela Bay, in my view, is exactly what is likely to happen in other municipalities in a long run. I mean, it appears that in the city of Tshwane, I believe that the DA might have had a conversation with the EFF. There is no way that the EFF could just walk away without resisting. I mean, after their motion was said not to have been tabled procedurally. I mean, I've never seen the EFF just walking away. The EFF usually will try to disrupt, will try to make their case. But besides, the ANC motion could have been worked on as well. But it appears to me that the EFF is acting very whimsically. And unfortunately, in a situation such as this, it is the ANC and the DA that look like vulnerable in this game, this puppet game that is being directed by the EFF. It promises to give government to the ANC in Tshwane. The ANC get worked up and all that. And then it promises to get rid of the DA. The DA gets on some maneuvers and survives. In all this, it is only the EFF that get maximum returns out of this thing. The ANC does not get anything. Of course, they are out of power. But as for the DA as well, they're spending a lot of time avoiding a crisis. They don't have a long strategy on how to function with the EFF and achieve certain goals with the EFF.
Could this boomerang in a way on the EFF? Could it result in their own voters starting to see them, like you say, acting whimsically and just being a disruptive force? That you say, okay, we're throwing in our lot with the DA because we don't want the ANC to come back into power. Then you say, no, Ethel Trollip is white and we need to get rid of this whiteness. Then you say, Solim Simanga does not consult, so we need to show him the door. But then, like you say, you reach a backroom deal at the 11th hour, you leave him. Not too long ago, Herman Mashaba must go. Now Herman Mashaba is a good boy and we will keep him there for now.
Exactly. I mean, that is the type of game that they are playing. But it comes to an end because as the EFF, you can't just go to your voters and say to them, oh, by the way, I've been able to disrupt 15 parties since you voted me, since you have given me that percentage, you voted me to parliament. At some point, voters are going to say to you, show us some of the substantive benefits that we have secured for us in parliament and so forth. Show us those things. It just cannot be about disruptions. I mean, the whole thing gets entertaining. I mean, what is happening at the coalition, all this commotion, this uncertainty can look entertaining, news grabbing and so forth. But at the end of the day, it becomes very clear it's got nothing to do with service delivery. I mean, the last 10 days that has been spent on this motion in Tshwane, the back and forth, the focus, the manner in which it preoccupied people. I mean, I would believe some of the council functions must have been set aside for that. And then it goes back to that position. What is it that voters gain out of this commission, this commotion? Is it just the game by the political elites? Is that what democracy is about? We vote for people in and then they go roll the dice without giving us a criteria as to why they went into coalition with party A and not party B, without consulting with us as the voters. So one way or another, there's going to be a price to this. And I believe the EFF is aware. That is why I don't think, irrespective of the survival of Mr. Solim Simang now and Mashaba, who still believes he's in a good position, I don't see the EFF really going into these 2019 elections with the DA looking strong and running those municipalities. Either they will keep on threatening the DA, making it preoccupied with saving those municipalities instead of fully campaigning. I mean, you look at what the DA is worried about now. They're looking at these metros. When do they campaign? Every time they go to their constituents, they're going to ask them, what's happening with the coalitions? It's not workable at this point.
Now, in terms of how much can we read now? We're still about a year away from elections. We see what's happening to the EFF. We see what's happening to the DA. We see what's happening to the ANC. What kind of indicators are there currently in terms of how the upcoming election is likely to go?
I've observed elections before, going far back. I mean, for many years I've observed elections. I can tell you that this is the election that no party can claim to be in charge. The EFF is trying a few things, destabilizing and at the same time pushing this radical idea, at time also going as far as attacking minority groups, what they've said about the Indians as well, recalibrating their radicalism and so forth. Trying to assess, will this mean 2% of vote increase on the margins? As for the ANC, they are on a rescue mission, as I call it. Will people believe indeed that Ramaphosa can actually save the ANC? Can he, reinstill integrity and capacity of our institution? The DA as well, implosion within the DA in the Western Cape, struggling with all this coalition, not being able to build good relationship with other opposition parties. So my view here is that everyone is going into these elections very vulnerable. COPE does not know if it's going to come back with 1% or not. Because in terms of the natural flow of things, they are on their way out. Trend says they need to be on their way out. Holomisa must be very much concerned as well. Hence, Buthelezi does not want to resign and leave the party now. He wants to try to walk them to the 2019 election. So for me, no one can claim to be in charge. Everyone is vulnerable, and these elections are going to tell us a lot as to how South Africans are willing to punish political parties.
All along, the ANC has had this big majority, and we saw them use this majority to protect Zuma with all those motions of no confidence against him in Parliament. And at that time, people started to say, but you know what South Africa needs is not one dominant party, but rather more kind of a, not one particular political party having a majority, and therefore you have to rule by coalition. But that coalition route also has its drawbacks, as we're seeing now. You're trying to keep the coalition going, and then you've got no time to focus on policies and service delivery and that kind of thing. Now, many are saying that we could end up with coalition politics at national level after next year's elections, if the ANC does indeed suffer a drastic drop and goes below the 50% margin. But, it's scary in a way to think that on a national level, if you had the ANC sitting at about 48 or 47, like the DA was sitting in Nelson Mandela municipality, you've got the DA there and you've got the EFF playing kingmaker with its 5 to 10%. And, we would end up like Australia with a different prime minister or president every second day.
I mean, it's a fact of life that the age of absolute majority in South African politics is gone. You will no longer have that. There's a lot happening even in different smaller municipalities where that absolute majority is declining for the ANC. So what that means indeed is that we're getting into the age of coalitions. But we're also getting into the age of instabilities, because if you look at the culture of politics in South Africa, political parties tend to be very rhetorical, and political parties tend to have a lot of ego. Leaders of the political party tend to be very excessively egotistical to a point where they will not get their parties into compromise. That is why these coalitions are vulnerable, because no one is willing to raise their hand and say, I compromise on point B so that I can achieve C. They get into this coalition with absolute ideas. That makes for a very difficult coalition environment, because it says that even if parties fail to get that outright majority, 50 plus 1, they still carry themselves as if they are sitting on 60%. I mean, you've got 43%, you couldn't get absolute majority, but you want to implement policies as if you've got 63%. You are not compromising. That is that political culture of ultimatums, my way or the way. We can't find the middle ground. Unfortunately, it is going to be the age of instability. It will settle down eventually after years, but not without us experiencing instability in municipalities that are taking time to pass the budget. At national government, you might start seeing even the budget collapsing for the first time if you are going to have those coalitions. Unfortunately, that's just where we're going.
Finally, to wrap things up, I mean, all of this can sound very gloomy, and it can make an ordinary South African citizen feel very depressed. I see that recently the Institute for Race Relations have released their report that things in South Africa are significantly better on almost every front since '94. What do you make of that? How do you tie it up with all of these negative things that are happening, and all this talk about crime and inequality and redistribution and the white monopoly capital, and then you've got this report coming up and saying, well, if you just look at the raw facts, on almost every front, things have become better since '94.
Look, we have experienced oppressive regimes in this country for hundreds of years. The British colonialism, apartheid, and slavery and so forth. We've experienced those regimes for oppression for many years. We have democracy. We are entitled to demand more. We are entitled to demand more within the shortest space of time, because if you ask people as to whether those things that we want to achieve, that absolute great democratic stability, perfect institutions, corrupt people being sent to jail, takes hundreds of years for some of the countries to arrive at that. So we are quite hard on ourselves, and it's a good thing. I mean, all these things I'm saying about the fight between the EFF and the ANC and so forth, it's a good thing for democracy. These coalitions are unstable. It's a good thing. I want to see the voters getting much more involved, because it strengthens the legitimacy of decision making. So if someone asks me across the street, where are we now? Of course, we've got problems here and there. There is some sense of instability, but I do think we are getting there in terms of our democratic consolidation. We got there quicker than many countries. Some countries, when they ran into the problems we are running into, their institutions had totally been decimated. Ours are still largely standing.
Well, Patecha, as always, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating discussion, wonderful insight, and excellent analysis as always. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to your viewers.
And until next time, inshallah, next week and the week thereafter, we're focusing a little bit more on social issues. So stay tuned for those programs. Until next week, fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وامنح الناس حبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك جميل المساعي وامنح الناس حبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك كن سموحا لخصمك تلقى خصمك